everyone. Welcome back. I'm Vanessa and this is Fotis.
Hello, everyone.
And we are here again. We've pre-recorded this session in case you hadn't noticed, because we were having some scheduling issues. And so we wanted to bring you the third live in our series, which today is about loss. Loss when you separate and divorce from your partner. And so we're looking forward to getting stuck in with this. And obviously, loss is a big thing in this area of our work, and we talk about it a lot with our clients. And we want to kind of widen the discussion just from the loss of the partner. So, Fotis, what are your thoughts about loss during separation and divorce?
Well, like you say, the most obvious is loss of your partner, isn't it? But there's so many other factors, so many other elements that come with it, from loss of that partner, loss of a planned future with that partner and children, obviously, if there are children involved. Loss of identity can be a huge one, can't it?
Yeah, I think the loss of the future that you thought you had mapped out is massive, actually. And I think it's underestimated. And I think actually, as time goes on and people continue through the process of divorce, I think that becomes the hardest type of
Mm.
loss in my experience, because essentially you think you kind of when you what you might do when you retire, where you might want to live together, the holidays you want to take, and then suddenly that is literally wiped off the table. And I think that is one of the hardest losses to come to terms with in the longer term, actually.
Yeah, and not on the flip side of that, but the other thing that people have sort of spoken to me about, and that I sort of experience as well, is kind of the loss of little rituals and routines, whether that be, like the Sunday strolls to shops to buy the papers, or taking the kids to swimming on a Wednesday. It can be like some of the smaller sort of micro losses that people don't really expect to miss, or only miss once it's gone. It's that classic case of you don't know it's there until it's gone. So
Yeah.
that can sometimes be very difficult to deal with, and the way that those sort of losses creep up on you can be unexpected as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's also kind of tying in from that is loss of lifestyle. So a lot of people, there's a big change in lifestyle, a lot to do with change in finances when you divorce. You know, when you're splitting assets and things like that, maybe you have to move to a smaller house or a different location, and you're used to a certain way of life and a
Mm.
lifestyle, and that can be quite difficult, and can be something that keeps people stuck in relationships for longer than perhaps
Yeah.
they should be. Um, and I think as well as the kind of loss of our partner, that person, it's also loss of the other people in the life we had with that person. So, the obvious one is in-laws and,
Mm.
families to do with our spouse, but it could
Yeah.
be actually people within our own family. Sometimes divorce can cause quite big divisions in family and friends. I don't know whether you experience that
Yeah.
with your clients and yourself. Looks like Fotis has frozen. Frozen.
And as you said, lifestyle, what you're used
You
to.
froze them,
Oh,
Fotis,
did I?
time, so I missed we missed the whole of that.
It was really good as well. I'll see if I can do
Can
it
you run
again.
that by us again?
I'll take it from the top. Yeah, as you were saying, not only is it the family and the in-laws, but people can often get into arguments about friendship groups. It's almost like how do we divide those? It can put your friendship groups in a difficult position because often they don't want to be seen to be taking sides. But for whatever reasons, there is a loss of certain friends. And that can really hit hard when you're used to depending on those people or socializing with those people, or sometimes thinking that the friendship was actually a bigger bond than it was. And then when you see that falling to the wayside, that can be a really big hit.
Yeah, I agree. So there are lots of different types of losses, as we've just discussed. do you want to talk a bit more about the actual experience of the loss, as in what we experience emotionally, and what that's like? And I think you've got a
Yeah,
diagram
absolutely.
to
And
share.
actually, I've got a graphic that's going to help with that. I feel like I'm on Blue Peter or something, but
Fantastic.
here's something that I hope is going to make it a little bit
This is
easier
going to be seamless.
to describe.
Yeah,
I'm really hoping that on screen you can see something called the loss cycle
you can.
and a very complicated chart there. Okay, it's very simple, and it's actually it's a really important thing to explain, but it is simple also. But Elizabeth Kubler-Ross back in 1969, I think, came up with the loss cycle to describe grief and loss, and it's very adaptable, very adaptable to what happens when we lose a main relationship, when we go through a divorce or separation. And it describes the five main stages that people experience, starting with denial through to anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. So over a period of time, we'll go through these emotions from denial to acceptance. And what this graph shows is that movement over time, but also how our energy levels change depending on what part of the cycle we're in. So when we go through anger, it's all their fault, they're to blame for everything. Our energy levels can be quite high. Then as we fall away to bargaining, it's my fault, what can I do to fix it? And then lower down to depression where I can't do anything, it's all useless and there's no point. You can see the change in energy levels. We'll always be moving forward towards acceptance. That amount of time is going to vary from one situation to another. But it's really important to stress that most people will go through these stages. You're not alone. So when I was going through my own divorce and separation and I came across this, it really helped me gain sort of clarity on what was going on. Because one day I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, do you know what? I think I've got a handle on this. I'm okay. And then sometimes by the end of the day, never mind the next day, I'll be back at depression, hardly able to deal with anything, no energy levels, etc. So I think it's good to know that most people go through this. I think it's good to be able to identify whereabouts on you are. I think that can give you real clarity. And obviously, as we know, if you have that clarity, you can hopefully control your emotions a little bit better and understand them more.
Yeah, I think that's really useful. Thanks for sharing that. And I think, it's also important to say that it's kind of not linear. So it doesn't neatly get packaged up. I mean, you just alluded to that, saying that like even within a day, we can go up and down between the different emotions. And we're not just neatly, we finished with depression now and we finished with anger now. And
Mm.
because suddenly something can happen that can send you into a rage again about the divorce or the relationship ending. And I think, understanding those things, you're so right, helps you to know how to deal with them better. Um, and knowing, okay, this is what's happening. So yeah, I think that's a really important cycle to understand when you're going through a separation and loss. It's traumatic, and a divorce is the second most traumatic life event that you go through after death of a loved one. So that kind of puts it in perspective.
Mm.
So I think it is really important to understand how that impacts you. And I think it's then, okay, what do we do about it? So it's fine of being aware of it. So you've raised the awareness there with the cycle, which is great. So what can people do about it? And there are, I think, lots of strategies that can help you to um, cope better, to feel better, and to move forward. Because often we can get stuck in one of those emotions, and that's what we don't want to happen. We don't want to get stuck in sadness. We don't want to get stuck in anger. We want to be able to lift ourselves out of that. And so the strategies that help with that, and one of them, that I think works really well is gratitude.
Yeah.
Such a simple thing. And it kind of gets bandied about everywhere. But actually, even in the darkest of times where you think there's no hope, there's no positivity, there will be something that you are grateful for that day. And it could be the good cup of coffee you made in the morning. It could be your lovely soft duvet. It doesn't have to be big stuff. But I think getting into a kind of routine of, either when you wake up in the morning thinking, what am I grateful for right now? Or when you go to bed at night, what was I really grateful for today? And actually, if you keep thinking that, it it does give you those glimmers of hope, which helps to
Mm.
lift you out of the negative emotions.
Yeah, I really like that. I like to dovetail. I like to, well, to myself, but also to my clients, to sort of end the day with that gratitude sort of list, if you want, but also start it. It kind of like dovetails both ends of the day really well and gives you something A to look forward to, and B something to start your day with in a positive way. So I think that's really important. I think the other really good thing to do is try to reframe the story, or try to rephrase the story. So rather than sort of say, I've lost my old life, when we were talking about lifestyle and routines and stuff, you can phrase it, I've lost my old life, but it helps to reframe it into, I get to design a new life. And you get to design it with a little bit of healthy selfishness, if you want, you know.
It just says frozen. Yes, I think that's very true. Having that kind of breakup bucket list that Fotis is talking about is really, really
Number of
important.
things that maybe you couldn't do whilst you were in the relationship. Did it pause again?
Yes, I took over from you. I'm terribly sorry.
No, that's fine.
I'm sure it was
I'm not sure
brilliant what you
why it's
said.
so bad at the moment.
Um, yeah. Well, we were just talking about, putting those things into your life that are things that you can look forward to and, can new experiences. Again, they don't have to be massive things, but that give
Mm,
you that compelling future to move towards. Um, I think there's also something very simple about kind of flipping things around. So, if all we think about is what we've lost, what's not there anymore, what we haven't got anymore, you know, all very kind of negative, we can simply flip that around and be like, okay, what have we gained? Now, you might be sitting there
mm,
thinking, well, I've gained nothing, I've just lost everything. Well, actually, even if it's as simple as like, I can now choose what I watch on television every night, they seem very trivial things,
mm,
but actually, the way we think about these things is really important and can change our whole outlook. And, I think depending on the situation you're in your relationship, if you're someone who's been in an abusive marriage where you had no control over anything, you felt a shadow of your former self, you had no voice, you weren't important and you were treated in a really vile, unkind way. Actually, there's a lot of gains when you're not
mm.
in that. Yes, there's still a lot of change and a lot of negative emotion alongside, but it can actually feel quite liberating. So I think it also depends what situation you're in
Of
your
course.
marriage and in your relationship.
Yeah. And if you stack all these practices, even if some are more applicable than others in your situation, going back to what you just said, but if you stack all these, like the gratitude, writing a bucket list of experiences, reinventing yourself, whether it be hair color or what you wear, reinventing or changing your home environment, one might be more relevant than the other in your individual case, but when you stack these practices together, it can be really impactful overall with that movement along the loss cycle over time. You will find yourself moving forward. And
Yeah, 100%. I was just going to say that, with all of these things, it's about learning to cope with what we're going through. I mean, they always say it's not what happens to us
mm,
that makes us stronger, it's what we do about it. And I think that's very true. So, you know, all, like you say, all these little things that we're suggesting, which are genuinely helpful tools and techniques, um, they do really help. And it's not about trying to forget your relationship, unless you want to, obviously, but it's not trying to kind of
yeah,
blank it out of your mind. It's trying to learn to understand what you're feeling and going through and learn to cope with that. and find peace ultimately with the situation. We're not trying to kind of forget everything. You know, they're a big part of our lives. And we might have been in a relationship with somebody for 25, 30 years.
Mm.
So it's about coping strategies, not forgetting
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. And also be kind to yourself. It's a rather flippant thing to say, but to your point, allow yourself to feel those emotions. It's not about denial of those emotions, but if you can understand why you're going through them and that you will go through them, and put a distance towards it. You know, something that we talked about with clients is rather than say, I am sad, flip that to I am feeling sad. So you're putting a distance to that emotion. And by putting a distance to that emotion, you can actually, you're identifying it and you can process it. So there is a difference to how you speak to yourself. So allow yourself to feel those emotions, expect to feel them, and like you say, process them, and it's how you cope with those. So by accepting that loss is real, to your point, we're not saying that it isn't real, it is real and significant, but you can view it as an opportunity to grow in your own space afterwards.
100%. And, you know, people often say to me, and I'm sure they do to you, Fotis, you know, "Oh, time's a great healer." You know, and just give it time. And there is an element where time is a good healer. You know, obviously with time, we're getting further away from the actual issue, the actual breakup, the actual separation. Um, and so inevitably, as you get further away, the rawness of your emotion will
Mm,
diminish because you're simply further away from it. But I think that also is quite passive. And
mm,
actually, you do need to put some effort into that growth and development and that moving forward, what you've just said, you know, those strategies we've talked about, and actually, you know, trying to help yourself to move forward, to shift your focus, to think about something you're grateful for today. You know, it's not a passive
mm.
experience or journey. You know, we want to be invested in that growth and development and recognize those things. So yeah, I don't know whether you've got a view on time's a great healer or not.
Yeah, I think to your point, it is, but I think we can, the more we help ourselves move forward, the less passive we are about it, the quicker those changes will come, and the less likely we are to be stuck. And again, yeah, a lot of this stuff is easy to say, but I think we've both had from personal experience know that when you do put these practices in motion, little by little, you know, you might think, oh, what's journaling? How's journaling going to help me? Or how's being thankful for this? But we know that through experience of actually doing it little by little, it's sort of self-motivating. But by taking action, you feel better, and therefore you're more likely to do a little bit more the next day.
Yeah.
So starting is often the hardest part, but
Yeah.
it's important to know that these practices work. And something that we alluded to the other time about your support team, you know, when you don't feel like it, speak to your friends, speak to part of that support team to help you move forward.
100%. I think that's really, really valid advice and really great advice, actually, because everything kind of ties in together. And, you know, it's important. And like we said in the support team episode, you know, you're going to meet new people. So that loss you feel of some of the people,
Mm,
there are going to be new people who come in and who fill your world up in ways you wouldn't even know about
yeah.
now. So, yeah, I think that's really, really great. Um, right, thank you. I think we've covered a lot about loss in that short space of time. Um, I think the loss cycle is really pertinent, and we've gone through those strategies, which I think are really, really important to bear in mind, and find the ones that work for you in your situation. You know, it's normal to feel loss and a kind of grief when you are going through a big separation or breakup or divorce, but also there are ways to move forward. And obviously, you can work with a trained divorce coach like Fotis and I, um, if you want some more specific one-to-one help. So obviously, that's always an option. Please do follow us on our accounts. We're both on Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn. I'm Vanessa White, Vanessa White Coaching. Fotis, you are.
Emmanuel, emotional equity coaching on Instagram and LinkedIn, and Fotis, the coach, on TikTok.
Lovely. And please do share this with anyone you think needs support who is going through a divorce or separation and would value listening to what we've got to say. Please comment or DM. We would love to hear from you. If you've got anything you would like to add or ask us, that would be great. And we will be back with another episode next week on our divorce series. And we are going to be looking at communicating with children specifically. And that might be actually communicating with them about you separating and divorcing, or it could be post-divorce and some of the issues that that throws up. So if that's relevant to you, hopefully that will be a very insightful episode. So please do join us next Tuesday at 6:30.
Look forward to
Thank
it.
you, Fotis.
Thanks, Vanessa.
All right, bye.
Bye.